though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Words of spiritual consolation from the Psalms. But what of the cold realities that follow bereavement, loss, or incapacity? How, for instance, do those touched by tragedy manage continuing education of dependent children? For some, the burden is eased by the help of charitable organizations. And we're going to look at the work of one in particular, the Royal Masonic Institution for Boys. Since the closure of the institution's own school at Bushy, some have perhaps thought there was no longer a need to continue the work of the institution. But nothing could be further from the truth. For all the boys are now being cared for at other schools throughout the country, and the cost of their education either wholly or partially met by the institution. Who then is eligible for help, and what kind of need qualifies boys for consideration? Each one is different. Take the case of Mrs. Pickering. Her husband was a Trinity House pilot on the River Thames. Today she lives near Folkestone, but at the time tragedy struck, she lived in Gravesend.
We were all set to move. We had a house on the market. It was sold as far as we knew. We were all planning, starting putting things in boxes. And he went out that evening. He said, I'm just going to pop and see one of his friends. He came in about 9:45, and he said, I'll make a cup of tea. And I said, oh, I'll be in the kitchen in a tick. And I went in the kitchen a couple of minutes later, and he said he felt peculiar. By that time, his speech had gone, was starting to slur, and his left and right side was going. And I got him on the kitchen floor and called the doctor, who was there very quickly. The ambulance came, I think, about 2 or 3 minutes later, and he was down in the hospital. By that time, he was in a coma, and he died at 4:45 the following morning without having regained consciousness again.
Adrian is Mrs. Pickering's stepson, and although he's now serving with the RAF, then he was still at school.
Adrian was home. Adrian was home because it was August, and he was home for his summer holidays, you see. And he was a good lad that night. It's amazing, you think children are children until a crisis hits you, and suddenly they seem to gear into action almost like adults. And he was very brave. It was hard for him because he'd already lost his mother when he was 6. And I think for a moment he felt utterly bereft, you know, having lost his mum and his dad.
Mr. Spalding was the Provincial Charity Secretary for East Kent at that time, as well as being Adrian's headmaster. Here he speculates on what might have happened had the institution not been there to help.
Well, of course, he would have had to leave if a grant was not available, and the institution very quickly, on quite a brief report from me, undertook to pay his boarding fees and to give him pocket money as well, enabling him to live with the other boys with the utterest happiness.
Adrian wanted to go into the RAF as from 6 years old. And he never changed. That's what he always wanted to do. If Adrian had been 8 or 9 or 11 or 12 when it had happened, he'd have had time to adjust to a different school and different surroundings. But at that particular time, if it hadn't been for the institution agreeing for him to be able to stay on at Sir Roger Manwood School, I think he would have completely gone to pieces, and I don't think he would be in the RAF where he is now, quite honestly. And that's why I'm very grateful for what they did.
Here at Great Queen Street in the heart of London are the offices of the institution, where the Board of Management hold their quarterly meetings.
The following members of the board have recently retired: Brothers Beardmore, Dan and Brother Reynolds, and I think it would be your pleasure that we should send a letter of thanks to each of them for their services over the years. Well, we now come to the report of the Petitions Committee, and I call upon Brother Howard to introduce it.
Right Worshipful Brother Chairman.
There is, of course, a similar organisation for the Royal Masonic Institution for Girls, and it should be noted that eventually the two institutions will merge to form one combined charity. But that is for the future. At the moment, the chairman of the Petitions Committee is reporting. It is they who are responsible for examining all the applications for assistance.
Family where the mother has had to take a full-time teaching job to maintain the family. She has 2 boys and 2 girls. One of the girls is autistic and needs constant and individual supervision. This is a situation where the boys cannot hope to develop properly unless suitable boarding school places can be found for them. The Petitions Committee therefore recommends that this petition should be accepted, but that the financial arrangements should be deferred until suitable boarding school places have been found. The other case I would like to mention is on the same page, subparagraph 4.
Frederick Debonair lives with his son Roger in a small cottage near High Wycombe. They moved there soon after the death of his wife.
Well, Roger, this is not certainly the day to come and play football. What I prefer to do is sit in front of the fire and watch television. Well, I don't know what you think about it all. You don't want to do that.
I prefer to go out.
My main consideration was to weld again the fabric of a family, and this I decided to do on my own, sort of rather independently. And for quite a few months, in fact about a year, it worked very well. The only problem, as far as I could see, was financial. When my wife was alive, all the money that she earned, of course, paid for the fees, and so really when she died, I was left not only running a house, but also with paying the fees for Roger as a day boy. And the boarding fees were twice that amount, you see. I couldn't possibly afford it. And so I was left with rather a quandary to that, and it was that on that particular occasion that I approached the lodge secretary and said, look, I am in a bit of a state, and I explained to him, this is my situation, can you help, in almost desperation, really. And they discussed my case in a committee, and immediately, I say, made me a grant from the lodge funds, short term. But long term, what they did was to write off to the institution and say, look, this man has got these problems, what can we do to help? And well, I'm very thankful to say that they came back with the magnificent offer of saying, okay, as far as the boarding is concerned, you just pay a small amount of it and we'll pay the rest. And that's how it's gone. And there's been a terrific load off my mind since then.
Without the grant, Mr. Debonair is convinced that he would have had to change his job, with all the uncertainty and insecurity that would have meant for both him and Roger. As it is, life can continue in an ordered routine.
I make sure that I'm there at about 4:45, and generally the weekends we, certainly in the summertime, go out and go fishing and that sort of thing. I feel the weekend is the time when we can have a normal family life. In other words, the family situation is reinforced at that particular time.
It was some time after the institution had approved the grant that the representative of the local lodge visited Roger's school.
He turned up quite out of the blue and spoke to the headmaster of the school, and he asked how Roger was getting along, you know, was he settling in okay, and was he all right for books and clothing, and generally inquired after every aspect of the welfare there. What strikes me is always this caring attitude, which is fantastic.
Brighouse, West Yorkshire. It's here that Mr. and Mrs. Wade live with their 2 grandsons, Andrew and Martin. In 1974, their daughter and her husband flew to Turkey on a special vacation.
Well, the holiday they took in Istanbul, it was a prize for Graham's having made the most progress for the previous year with regard to insurance and that kind of work that he did. He came out top in the, if it was a competition, and the prize was a holiday. But as I have thought since, it was a price rather than a prize, I think, that he had to pay.
Time is 1 o'clock and here is the news. There has been a major air disaster near Paris. A Turkish Airlines DC-10 on its way to London with over 300 people on board crashed shortly after takeoff from Orly Airport.
I was just about to cut the first piece of meat on the Sunday joint, and I just heard the news, as it were, in the background. We had the radio on, and it was just like a cold hand seizing me. And I said to Mary, I said, well, it won't be our daughter's plane. I said, because they are coming to Heathrow. But it was so, because apparently there'd been a change of plans. And it wasn't until during the night at 2:15 a.m. that they rang from the airport to say that our daughter and her husband had both been killed. So the children didn't get to know until the following day properly.
Since then, the boys have been cared for by their grandparents. Not an easy task for a couple who had settled down to a peaceful retirement. But there are many compensations. One of which is perhaps best expressed by something young Martin said.
He had a list of people that he loved most, and of course his mum was the first and most important. And then, of course, his father. And then a very close third was Grandma.
Grandma and Granddad.
And Grandma and Granddad, yes. So we were very pleased to be in the running, sort of thing.
But what if the institution hadn't been there to give their assistance?
Well, I really don't know how we should have coped. I suppose we should have coped somehow, but it's certainly a great help to us.
Since my father died when I was 9. They've had this interest there for my well-being. I'm very grateful.
Philip Wilton lives in Norfolk and has the unusual distinction of twice being assisted by the institution. After the death of his father, he spent 5 years at the institution's old school at Bushey. But it was only after he had left and started work that he realized that he wanted to become a professional musician.
Well, I started to play the guitar when I was about 11, and it happened, like I think with a lot of musicians who start late, it developed as a hobby. But when I was, just after I left Bushey, I saw John Williams playing on the television. I think it was at Ronnie Scott's, and he played a piece by Saw. And I realised the full possibilities of the guitar, having watched him play, and decided to go and take some lessons. Well, having had about 2 or 3 lessons, I was hooked. Although my fingers were quite nimble, I still hadn't developed any kind of technique and knowledge of the fingerboard, so I had to start really from the beginning.
Constant practice brought him to the stage where he was accepted as a full-time student at the Leeds College of Music.
While I was at Leeds, I had a letter from the Masonians saying that they would be willing to help me, you know, with my career. And so I had a donation from them, which was very helpful because music is a ridiculous price. Strings as well. I mean, if you're playing 3 or 4 hours, 5 hours a day, I mean, a set of strings only lasts you about a week. And they're very expensive, you know, £3.50, £4 for a good set of strings. And if you total that up for a year, it's quite a lot just on strings. That's before the music, and the guitar, of course.
Not all the cases dealt with by the Royal Masonic Institution for Boys are due to death or incapacity. William Bieber was a theatre manager until he was made redundant. He approached the institution about the continuing education of his 2 sons. The application went before the Petitions Committee.
You really do bare your soul. You can't go and sort of, I don't mean cheat, but you can't not tell everything, even though it may be slightly embarrassing. And just before Easter last year, I had a letter from them saying that the Board of Governors after the executive committee had reviewed the case and possibly given their blessing, then the Board of Governors meet and sees what's been done, and they agreed that a grant would be given for the boys' education, both boys, which was very generous, I felt, for the rest of their lives at the school. And I think this is a marvellous thing that they do this. They don't just give you the money and review it every year. There is a person, a Mason, who, in your own lodge, who they appoint or is appointed, and he is there and he comes round and says, well, is everything going all right? How are you doing? Not as a spy, just as a friend.
The tragedy which struck Josie Mitchell and her family was directly connected with her husband's love of sailing and the sea.
Keith and 4 friends were asked to take a boat across to Monte Carlo for some people they'd met through business associates really. And they did, after a lot of talks and discussions, decide that the weather was reasonable enough for them to do it. And they set off from Poole on the 27th of February, and we just didn't hear from them again.
We're carrying out visual search. We're looking for wreckage, a dinghy, or someone in the water. Roger, tell them we've completed our run now. We'll be returning to the airfield.
When it became clear that the search would have to be abandoned, the local lodge contacted the family.
When we'd all really given up hope, they came to see me because they knew that the business would founder without Keith there, and that eventually I would not really have any sort of income.
Josie Mitchell has 2 children, and it is their education that is her prime concern. Has the institution's assistance helped?
Oh, particularly with David, yes. Very great help. Because he had problems with his hearing much earlier on at infant school. And if he had to leave the school he's at now, I think it would have been disastrous for him. Because he's virtually 2 years behind everyone else. Or at least he was to begin with.
Christchurch, Oxford. It's here that Robert Paul is studying. He's in his 3rd year, and again it's the institution's grant that is helping him with his course.
It's called Philosophy, Politics and Economics, and after the 1st year you're allowed to drop one of the subjects if you want to. And now I'm just doing Philosophy and Economics. Books are very expensive. It's quite usual for a paperback to cost around £2.50 to £3.50, and some textbooks as much as £8. Well, I've worked out so far that I've spent in the region of £150, and I think 250 to 300 by the time I finished.
Christopher Cone was at Cambridge University, where he studied medieval history and art. Today he works at Sotheby's in London.
£145,000 against you. £145,000 then. 150,000. 150,000. 155,000. Sold at £155,000 then. 155.
My father died when
I was 11, which was, I suppose, about 2/3 of the way through prep school. And it was probably at that stage that the Masons started to help when I went to St. Paul's in London.
At 73,500. With the back of the room, 73,500 pounds. Your bid, sir. 73,500.
It sponsored my education at school. And I was very lucky at school that I did have the opportunity to speak to a lot of people, teachers or friends, if you like, who were interested in pictures and who were prepared to encourage my interest. And when I was at university, I did have to buy quite a few art books, which, as you know, are pretty expensive. And by helping me to purchase a few books, they did genuinely foster an interest which has certainly paid off, and an interest which I now have, and shall always have.
86,000. At 86,000 pounds. 86,000 pounds.
The Gower Peninsula in South Wales. Since the death of her husband some years ago, Hazel Hayward has been responsible for the education of her two sons, Neil and Stephen. The representative of the local Masonic lodge responsible for the Hayward family is Kenneth Rees.
At the time of Ray's death, we were all very shocked. And we immediately thought, I wasn't the master that particular year, but we immediately thought, now what can we do to help? And within a week or a fortnight or so, we were geared up Masonically to help Mrs. Hayward. It was a question of getting in touch with Cardiff and then also with London. And they also worked very hard, and things moved very well indeed, that we felt at least she knew that we were behind her.
It's been a tremendous help. It's meant they've been able to do everything any other boy could do, you know. I think that's one of the things I think that would concern any parent the most, is not for the child to feel out of the way in any way. So their help has, you know, been very good in that way.
Oh, they're the grandparent lads. They really knuckled down to schoolwork. The elder boy is doing very well. I'm hoping to enter university in October. And the younger one, he's hoping to enter the Swansea Grammar School, the Swansea Comprehensive Grammar School in October.
It's just reassuring to know that they are there if any problem does arise, you know. I mean, as I said, they've kept up a very close interest in the boys, and if they need any advice or help with which way to go in their jobs or careers or whatever, they're very willing to do anything they can to help them, you know. Even if it's only to guide them in the right direction, because that's not always easy to know for a youngster. So it has been a very good feeling to have them there.
As almoner of the lodge, the institution indeed does a grand job. It's the whole being of Masonry, I think, is to help and charity.
Help and charity. The guiding principles of the institution. The cases you have just seen represent some of the 500 that are cared for at any one time. 500 separate tragedies. And every year, there are 100 new applications. All concerned with the same thing. To maintain the education of the boys and to give them the best start in life. As you know, the need for continuing financial support is a constant and pressing one. And your assistance would be more than welcome. Donations may be sent to the Secretary of the Royal Masonic Institution for Boys, Great Queen Street, London, WC2.